Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our second information session on the Neighborhood Economic Recovery Fund. My name is Teresa Barreras, and I'm the Director of our Business District Programs at the Office of Economic Development, City of Seattle. We have an hour for this information session today, and it is being recorded. So just so you know, we will record this session and we will have that recording available to you afterwards, and we will be posting that on our website. One small change from maybe what we've done in the past, in this WebEx platform, you submit questions into the Q&A box, and within the Q&A box, you can submit them for everyone to see. If you submit in the chat, only the presenters will see that, which is okay too, but it's nice for all to be able to check the questions. And we will follow up with the recording and also this presentation. It might have been emailed to you just a few minutes ago, so if you check your email box, if you'd like to have your own copy to follow along, it might be there for you. So our agenda for tonight, we will talk about this Neighborhood Economic Recovery Fund grant, go through all of the requirements and guidelines, and we'll be able to answer questions about that. We will also talk about the Flux grant system, which is the online tool that we are using for your applications. And then we'll touch on some other resources that are coming as well. And there will be time for questions. First of all, I want to give a little bit of a general overview about where this money is coming from. It's called the Seattle Rescue Plan. It was funding that the city received from the federal government that was in response to the COVID impact to help the city recover from the impacts of COVID. And this is just one allocation of funding. There are others, but this most recent one was passed a month or so ago. You can read more. There's a link here on this PowerPoint where you can find more information about this, how this funding is getting allocated to programs in the city. And you can see here a few of the larger buckets, from housing to community programs. And this program is funded coming from this $23 million pot that you see here for community and small business recovery. And just to give you a little bit more information about this $23 million and what it's going for, a lot of it is coming to the Office of Economic Development. We have about $7.5 million for more small business direct financing and grants. We will have a new offerings for business technical assistance with about $1 million there. We will have some new funding for commercial affordability and tenant improvements. And there's also funding going to downtown recovery programs, some funding to workforce. $3 million is going to the Office of Arts and Culture for some nonprofit community org granting. And then $5.5 million is being focused on this Neighborhood Economic Recovery Fund. The goals of this fund and the intended results are to help neighborhoods and communities rebound from the impacts of COVID-19 and thrive, and for entrepreneurs and small businesses to recover from the impacts of COVID-19, stabilize and grow their businesses. So this fund is very focused on COVID recovery and impacts within neighborhoods and communities, business districts, and then also the small businesses that are located there. As a high-level overview, we will have at least $1.2 million available for this application fund. The awards will be at a minimum for $10,000, and the maximum amount you can request is $100,000. This process will be wrapping up in the fall, and we would be able to contract right away after we finalize all of our decisions, as early as November and December. That's about the earliest that you could receive a grant. And we also are saying that you have to have your grant under contract by May 1st. So sometimes it takes a little time to figure out, how the award's going to work and who's going to hold the contract and all of those things, and we understand that. But we do have to figure that out within a certain time frame after you hear about your award, and we can work with you on that. And then this funding can be used up until December 15th, 2023. So about 2 years for you to complete your projects. And now I will turn it over to Philip Sitt, our BIA advocate on our team, and he will talk about eligible projects. Are you ready, Philip?
Yes, thank you, Teresa. Philip here from the Only in Seattle team as well. I'll be going over some of the eligible projects. This is a few examples, but definitely not a full extensive list of potential projects that your organization or neighborhood business district organizations can apply for. One thing to note is that as you guys are thinking through your proposal to OEAD, is to really make that direct linkage from the past 18 months and the impacts of the pandemic uh, for your neighborhood and how your projects will directly relate to that kind of economic recovery and stabilization. Next slide. So one example, obviously many of you guys might have seen some of the streeteries or outdoor dining options that a lot of our small businesses have adapted to. That potentially, depending on where your neighborhood lies or your community organization is supporting which type of stakeholders, public and commercial space activation is one example of eligible use. Outdoor dining, outdoor seating, retail vendor markets, public art displays, events to bring people back into their neighborhood with the right public safety protocols and precautions, of course, and commercial space pop-ups. We know that many of our districts are facing vacancies, and many different neighborhoods are taking a wide range of approach to make those spaces more friendly, if not fully activating them for pop-up use as we head into the fall and winter months. Next slide. Another potential example, no, not a surprise, many of our neighborhood organizations have really pivoted to support their merchants and retailers to access the digital marketplace. If they have no website presence, helping them get online to claim their Yelp pages, or if they have a web page that needs a little bit of kind of sprucing up, those are all things that will fall under kind of the digital equity and access, along with kind of point of sale systems and kind of that guidance for merchants that are trying to move into a digital space. We have some great examples, including one here for Essential Southeast Seattle, which is a digital marketplace that encompasses 4 to 5 South Seattle neighborhoods just to get those merchants visible online. And for those folks that are selling items online, either via their direct site or through a third party, just making that information digestible in one place for commerce. Next slide. So in terms of communications, obviously there's new resources, new ideas, and kind of like ability to adapt that's being shared amongst different stakeholders. You guys might be running your own newsletters, websites, social media. Funding can be eligible for communication, both to stakeholders within your district, but also to folks around the region as well. If you have an event that you're promoting, that you want to get the word out, that could be potentially eligible use. One thing to note is that since these are federal funds, there are some restrictions about kind of that direct marketing or advertising. So think about your typical social media ad buys. That probably would not be the best project for these funds. But if you're working on a new website for your organization, you're trying to adapt your newsletter to be more digestible, maybe video webinars for your business stakeholders or merchants. Those are all things under communications that could be eligible. Next slide. Physical improvements and beautification. Here are some examples from Ballard, Columbia City. In terms of beautification and public realm improvements, that could be additional lighting. It could be murals, facade to improve the vacant storefronts and what have you. So that is another category of potential use of these funds as well. I think cleaning is obviously a major issue for any of our business districts. Some of the districts that are here today, you may or may not have a SPU, Seattle Public Utilities Litter Abatement Route, but even with that supplemental city services, there's always other projects that can improve the public realm, like graffiti removal, trash pickup, or any additional things that you guys might be considering to welcome folks back into your business corridor. Another thing could be pressure washing, alley cleanups. Things under the cleaning and physical improvements could also be an eligible use for these funds. Next slide. And then lastly, I think, and again, this is not an extensive list of all the eligible projects, helping businesses, merchants and employees adapt to the new restrictions or public health guidance. Those are all things, these are a few examples during phase 1 and 2 from our partners in the Chinatown International District and SODO and the U District, where during the initial first couple of phases of the lockdown, they worked to secure PPEs for their merchants and employees. They did commercial block wash, they did vaccine pop-ups. Depending on what the next set of mandates are going to be, we'll probably know more around October from King County Public Health. Those are things that you guys can try to maybe do your best to forecast, or if you already are thinking ahead of what your merchants will need as we get into the fall and winter months from a safety standpoint, those could potentially be an eligible use as well. One caveat as it relates to kind of public safety, if you guys are new to the OIS program or just new with talking to your various city departments, do feel free to reach out. There are a lot of city programs and initiatives that are readily available for neighborhood groups if you guys would like to pursue them. For example, the Seattle Police Department does provide support for merchants that are trying to make their interior less prone to shoplifting, less prone to break-ins. Those are some additional public safety measures that are free of charge that the Only Seattle team can connect your neighborhood organization with as well. Next slide. And Teresa, I'm not sure if this is, the slides are not numbered here. Is this, I think this might be Heidi's slide, if this is slide number 15.
Sure, Philip, I can go ahead and take that. So this is Heidi with the Only in Seattle team as well. So another really important use of the funds that would be eligible is around outreach and technical assistance. So a lot of our partners are developing, doing outreach to businesses or community members to help them access resources and technical assistance. So that capacity to do that, translations, all of that would be an eligible use as well. So next slide. Great, so I'll jump in a little bit about the review criteria for the different funds. There's 3 key criteria. These are also outlined in the grant guidelines. So I definitely would point folks to the webpage that has all the information and review the guidelines. So first is equity. So projects serving high COVID impacted neighborhoods and or projects focusing support for Black, Indigenous, people of color, businesses, and communities. So that's kind of equity criteria. Second is neighborhood economic recovery. So projects helping businesses and communities recover economically from COVID impacts and stimulating economic activity. And then the third key criteria is community supported. So projects directed by and directly benefiting the community. So these are the 3 key criteria for the grants, and proposals will be reviewed and scored against the criteria. There's actually a scoring guide that the review committee will use as an appendix on the grant guidelines if anyone would like to know any more detail there, and refer to that. And the proposals will be reviewed by an interdepartmental staff team from Office of Economic Development, Department of Neighborhoods, Arts, and community panelists as well. Next slide. And so I wanted to touch a little bit on COVID impacts. So the city of Seattle did do an analysis of different data points and develop some maps to understand areas of the city that were highly impacted by COVID. And these maps will help inform the the review of the proposals. The map here that you see on the slide is a compilation of the 4 different data points listed here. So that includes the Race and Social Equity Index, which combines data on race, ethnicity, socioeconomics, and health disadvantages. There's also the Displacement Risk Index, which evaluates the risk of displacement and access to opportunity for marginalized populations. And then third is COVID case rates per capita. And this is all census tract data, just to give folks an orientation. And then fourth was business impact data, looking at the percent low wage jobs as a share of all jobs and change between 2019 and 2020. Next slide. So Teresa talked a little bit about the kind of overview of the grant program. Just wanted to orient everyone to the timeline. So the RFP, the request for proposals, opened August 26th, about a week and a half ago. We are holding 3 different information sessions. You are here at the second one on September 8th. In addition, staff is available at any point while the request for proposals is open to answer any questions, talk through proposal ideas, etc. Proposals are due in the online grant portal by October 7th at 5:00 p.m. So that would be the deadline to submit. They do need to be submitted through the grant portal. And again, we're available to help troubleshoot that. And Teresa will be walking through in a few minutes, kind of do a demonstration on that portal. And then we do anticipate being able to announce awards in early November, and we'll be able to quickly move into contracting to support folks in getting those contracts underway. And then just a date to flag, the grant period can be flexible depending on your project and your needs, but all funds do have to be fully spent and invoiced by December 15th, 2023. Next slide. So just here's a little more information about the information sessions. We had hoped to maybe do some in-person sessions, and unfortunately with everything we are having to do them all virtual. So hopefully folks are able to access. We will be posting and recording them on OED's website if you want to refer to them, or if someone wasn't able to make one of the sessions. Next page. And just a couple of best practices as we've been talking to different community groups and some of our business district partners. So, one community, this is really focused on community-based solutions for neighborhood economic recovery. So neighborhoods really know what the impacts have been and have ideas for how to help their businesses and community members recover economically. So really emphasizing those community-based solutions. Encouraging folks to coordinate with neighborhood partners to minimize duplicative proposals as much as possible. So, reaching out, talking to folks, hearing what the ideas are, where you might be able to coordinate or align, where some of those opportunities might be. And also thinking about leveraging resources and expertise for your neighborhood. Philip mentioned some of the other resources in the city. There's also a lot of resources and expertise in your community, different partners working on strategies in the neighborhoods already, and thinking about how those might be leveraged to advance the projects and strategies that your neighborhood needs. And then finally, just wanted to touch on remind folks that these are federal funds. So there are some documentation and reporting requirements that come with federal funding. And we will be outlining those in a lot more detail in the contracts. And speaking of federal funding requirements, wanted to just touch on a couple of key ones so folks were fully aware of what some of those expectations might look like. Some terms that might come up is the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, which is what established the federal funding by Congress to help cities and states recover economically from the pandemic. And any federal funding has some parameters for what you can and can't use federal funding for, and they're known technically as the Uniform Administrative Requirements. And the main things to know about that we've bulleted here, and all of this information is also linked in the grant guidelines for anyone that wants to get a lot more detail. But the key things to note is, having tracking time and expenditures for the grant separately. So these are reimbursement grants. I think all federal grants are reimbursement. So you do need to track your time and expenses for the grant and then submit them to the city for reimbursement. So we know this can be really, really challenging, especially for small organizations who may not have a lot of cash flow or confront some of those expenses. So we really will, really want to work with folks as much as we can. This is definitely a question that's come up. One thing we can do is folks can get invoices for payment and then submit them as an invoice to the Office of Economic Development, and we can process those fairly quickly so that you can pay from your grant funds without having to front that cash. That is one way that you can do some of that. Folks can invoice quarterly, they can invoice monthly. So those are just a couple of options. And again, we can work with folks as much as possible to be flexible, but that is a requirement with the grant fund. So I wanted to flag that. There are some other things to note. One is the Davis-Bacon Act, which is probably something most people have not heard of, but this applies to any sorts of construction or projects like that. So that might be, like the physical improvement projects, like a facade project, or if you're constructing a shared outdoor seating area in your neighborhood, you would have to make sure that the contractor is paying prevailing wage and show documentation of that. So again, we'll provide support for that and provide guidance for that. And there's a couple of expenses that are not allowed with federal funds, and those are listed here. And then finally, there's something called a DUNS number that would be required, and that's just a registration in a database for the entity. It's a very, very simple thing to get, and we can help walk folks through that. Some folks may already have that. You do not need that to apply. It would be something you would need for the contract. Next slide. And just wanted to quickly go over the application questions, and then we can take a pause and take any questions from anybody. So feel free to put them in the chat, or we'll also take a pause and you can ask them verbally. So in general guidance, we would suggest that you review the funding application instructions and the grant guidelines, which I referenced. Those are on our webpage that are linked to. There's also some translated information there as well. Read the FAQs. And then one suggestion is to develop the answers to the application in a separate document so that you're not getting distracted by the grant portal. That might be easier. You certainly don't have to do that. That might be easier for folks, particularly if you're collaborating with other partners and want to kind of get your ideas jotted down on paper. We are using an online grant portal. The City of Seattle is moving towards a system called Flux. So eventually all of the city grants will be going through this system. So we're all kind of in a learning curve together. The link is here, and we'll be walking through a demonstration of this. You would have to create a user account and then open your application and answer the questions on the grant portal. Next slide. And so quickly, we'll run through the questions. There's 4 key questions that you need to answer through your application. The first, kind of going back to what Philip was saying, is because these are federal funds designated for economic recovery, you do need to state what are some of the financial hardships and impacts that your community, your neighborhood has faced as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so what's the problem or the issue that you're trying to solve with your project? And then the second question will ask you to summarize your proposal. What is your proposed project and how will it address the impacts from COVID? And to have a strong answer here, you will want to address the city's equitable recovery results that were talked about earlier, and also address and show some intentionality around how you will center racial equity in your proposal to help those that have been most impacted by COVID-19, including Black, Indigenous, and people of color, business owners, and community members. Next slide. You'll be asked to there's a list of neighborhoods, so you can choose your neighborhood. It's not a perfect list, so you may, hopefully I think most neighborhoods on there, it's a kind of a standard City of Seattle list. So choose your neighborhood from that list. There's also a place to describe where your project's going to be. So it might be a more specific location within that neighborhood, or it might be that your neighborhood isn't on that list, how you would present it. So there's a drop-down list and then a text box. And then the third question is community supported. So describe how your organization is representative and connected with the community that you are seeking to serve through your proposal. And then the fourth question is your project budget, where there's a budget form and you'll fill in your key costs that you're requesting funds for. And then there's a narrative place where you can describe some of those costs and give additional information. And then you do have the option to upload any documents that you want. It's not required, but if there's anything that you've got, such as a plan or a letter of support or other sorts of documents that you think would be helpful for the review committee, you're welcome to attach them there. Again, not required. And I think we will pause there and see if there are any questions that folks would like to ask before we jump into the online grant portal.
Hi, everyone. If you are able to unmute yourself, go ahead. I will go ahead and unmute everybody just in case folks don't know how to for the first time. And I just wanted to give you a heads up, unmuting now.
Oh, hi, it's Betty. Is there going to be a link or something somewhere for that DUNS number?
Yes, again, Betty, that's something that we can work with on the contracting side.
Oh,
so there's no need to worry about it right now. It's just a heads up. And what it is you register your organization as an entity in a database. It takes about 5 minutes. So we could definitely walk through this together.
And it can be very long.
Heidi, there's a question in the chat asking, can you provide more specificity on what entertainment is?
I am going to maybe see if Teresa wants to take that one, or we can get back.
Yeah, so that came up last time, and it is a tricky question. The way there isn't a lot of guidance about this. The way it's defined in the cost principles is that any cost of entertainment, including amusement, diversion, social activities, and any associated costs are unallowable, except where the costs are otherwise considered, the costs have a programmatic purpose and are authorized in the approved budget for the federal award. So that's tricky because the federal award is a very high level. It does talk a lot about neighborhood recovery and economic recovery. And so, I think we can try to characterize projects as having that recovery focus. And the way I read this, this is a general guideline for any federal fund, that generally entertainment is not a programmatic purpose. It's not something that the federal government would normally want to pay for. But in this case, it could have a programmatic purpose if it's directly related to some kind of neighborhood economic recovery that you can clarify or clearly describe in your project. So I know that's a little fuzzy. We don't have a good resource to help us determine what is and isn't exactly going to be eligible. We'll just have to look at your proposals and try to see if we have a good case to make about how the cost, and this is in the case for a lot of costs, how the cost is really addressing a recovery purpose. And so you can kind of see here where we don't have the clearest answers for everything, and we have to just use our best judgment.
Thanks, Teresa. Here's another question in the Q&A. And Carolyn, please feel free to expand. But the question is, can we get funds against money spent by our members for community events that support businesses and the neighborhood?
I think, well, one thing, I'm not sure if this is part of the question, but generally you can't spend until you have a contract. And so we can't pay you for something you've already spent money on in the past. And so that, if that's what you meant, I don't know. But if you get a grant and a contract, and then you have community partners as part of that project, and they are, making some eligible costs, or, spending part of the grant on eligible activities, then yes, I think that would be okay. So I guess it kind of depends exactly what you mean, and we can talk through that once you get your grant, and we'll get a little bit more detail about the project as we're developing the contract, and so we can kind of work through some of those details with you.
Thanks, Teresa. I'm going to unmute everyone again because some folks are not able to unmute themselves, and I believe Carolyn can expand on that question. So just a second, or actually, let me see if I can just click on Carolyn. Carolyn.
There we go. Hello. Yeah, this is Caroline with the Fremont Chamber. So I was imagining, so it sounds like all this funding is for new projects. It can't be something that's happened in the past. You've said that several times, so that's pretty clear. But if we had members, we have members, for example, who a dance company that teaches classes, and some of the things they've done in the past is they've had some of their dancers perform in abandoned spaces, and as a way of activating the community. So could we, going forward, put together a proposal where they do that again, and we pay the instructors for their time in creating those programs?
Yeah, I think that's a good example of where you can talk about the impacts of COVID and what the purpose of the activity is. It could be about activating vacant spaces. It could be about just bringing people back into the neighborhood to for this event, but also to shop at the local businesses while they're there.
Right.
And also helping an arts organization that has struggled during the pandemic, trying to help them recover. So I could see several points that you could make on that. And so that's where it's entertainment, yes, but it's not entertainment just for the purpose of entertainment. There are a lot of other purposes that you could say are helping to recover from the COVID impacts.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Related to that question, and I put this in the chat, but it's relevant. We have arts organizations like Moisture Festival, for example, and their whole, everything that they do is about putting on entertainment. So it seems to me that by perhaps adding to the proposal, underwriting part of their performances that typically happen in the spring, is that something? I mean, they wouldn't have the money, they wouldn't be able to perform, the artists wouldn't get paid. So and in part because of COVID and not being allowed to have gatherings and indoor spaces and all that. So is that something that would, do you think that a case that a proposal could be crafted to support something like that?
Yeah, I think so. I think you mentioned earlier that we said it has to be a new project. I just wanted to clarify that it could be something that you've done before, like the Moisture Festival, something that's happened before, but maybe it's going to have a hard time coming back because of all the impacts, as you were talking about. And so, yeah, I don't I don't think we're saying that it has to be a brand new project that you're cooking up for the first time. It can be
Okay.
something that has happened before, but you just have to be able to describe how it is helping to recover. And I think making that connection to the local artists who've been impacted and supporting them, I think is a good one to make as part of this, because I think those are small businesses who have been impacted.
Right. So in other words, we could poll our members and find out what sort of projects and events they're attempting to put together in support of themselves and their constituents. And we could collect those small projects or members' projects and combine that into a proposal. Do you see what I mean? So, for example, Moisture Festival or this dance studio I was talking about, we could sort of put the word out to our members that we're in a position to collect money and distribute it. I don't know, set it up so that they're contractors somehow, which would all be in support of the Fremont community. Does that fly, or does that sound shaky?
I think that could be, yes, I think a lot of folks are thinking about, like as we mentioned, partnerships, working together on multiple projects. The only thing that within the federal guidelines, you're not allowed to give out grants. So you
Okay.
can't say we're going to run our own grant program. If we get the fund, we're going to do a grant program where we're kind of having applications and deciding who's going to get the money. So you can't do that kind of thing.
Okay.
But if you had partners that you're working on projects and there are multiple projects and you're kind of collaborating and maybe you're helping to facilitate that, that should be okay.
Okay. All right. That's very helpful. I don't mean to monopolize. I have other questions, but I gather there are other people online, although I can't see them.
Yes, I'll go ahead and unmute everyone now.
Due to the time sensitive, we are in need of certain outdoor seating projects that I saw in your presentation. Do we need to coordinate and work with our neighborhood, or if we are requesting fund to improve the outdoor seating, then it would be in line with what is offering?
Are you a business owner and you're thinking about building out space for your own business?
So right now we have outdoor seating, but no cover for the fall and winter, and we're looking to make the area more inviting, to bring people back to the South Lake Union, and so we're trying to get some cover patio or putting up walls or plants to make it more inviting, because there's pretty much no walking traffic down there.
Okay, so generally, I guess what I'm thinking is that individual business projects are not as much of a priority as more projects that would support multiple businesses within a neighborhood or business district. We'll have other funds for individual businesses, like grants.
But the problem is the neighborhood restaurant, like right across from us and in the same building as us, they've completely closed already. So we're the only restaurant in that, corner in that block.
Okay, I think that's just sort of what this fund is for, is more for neighborhood projects. So, I mean, you could go ahead and apply and talk about the project, and it would probably be more likely to get funded if it's supporting more than just one business or supporting the broader community or neighborhood. And we will have other opportunities for individual businesses to try to get funding for their own business projects. So stay tuned for that, but that's just that's how this fund is created and what it's focused on is more neighborhood and community broader projects. Okay, well, should we pause on the questions for now and try to get through the online system? I can go quickly. Hopefully folks won't have too many problems, but I just wanted to walk through it to give you a quick demonstration. There are some videos on our website that also provide a quick demonstration of how to log in. This is the login screen that you're seeing on the presentation right here. I will now share my screen so that you can see the portal live. Hopefully you can see that okay. I know there's sometimes some gray boxes that show up, so hopefully that looks okay to you. So this is what it looks like after you log in. Once you log in, this gray box on the left is the menu. And you can see here, there's general information about the portal here on this grantee portal. You see different departments of the city that are on the portal now, Department of Neighborhoods, we're the Office of Economic Development. And then as you scroll down, you can see that you will have an account, and this is where you would have different applications, and grants and contracts will also be, and reporting will also be handled through the system. So if you go to the Office of Economic Development, this provides some information about the grant. There are some links here back to our website. There are links to the information sessions, the guidelines. All of this information is also on the website, even more than this. This is just a summary of the information about the grant. There's our contact information with our emails and phone numbers to contact us. And I'm going to go ahead and hit the Apply Now button. This is what you push when you're ready to apply. I can just show you what it looks like. So this is what it looks like. This blue box at the top is a summary, kind of a header of your application, and things will show up as you start typing in. So if you scroll down, just note that the portal doesn't auto save, so you need to click the Save and Continue button at the bottom, or Save and Close if you're ready to close it out for the day. Scroll down, and here you see under the table of contents, there are links to different parts of the application, so you can jump around if you want to. You add your organization, click the Add New button here to enter your organization information. If you have a federal ID number, then you can select organization, otherwise you would select community group and enter in some of the information here and click Save. Oh, it's telling me I can't have, so there are some required information that you have to enter in order to apply. Let's just do this so that I can show you something later. But you can see you get warning messages to help you fill this out. Okay, hopefully I got them all. I'll have to delete this later. So the questions that are in bold are generally the ones that are required. So you have to select if you're authorized to submit, project title, amount requested. You click the box and you can enter in your information, project start and end date. And then here are the questions that Heidi was going over earlier. COVID impacts, you click the box. You can see character count here that will be counting for you as you type, or you can copy and paste into the box. Some of these boxes have formatting options here, and those do take up characters, but you can use bullets and bold and those kinds of things. Here's the neighborhood list as Heidi was mentioning. Click on one and push the arrow to add it or take it off. Here are the other questions. Here's the budget. In order to create the budget, you click this plus sign right here on the right, and a budget form opens up, and you fill out, here are some general categories of costs that you can use. And if those don't fit what you need, you can enter other costs here, other descriptions of your costs with the amount. Hit save. And then this is the narrative where you can talk about anything related to your budget that you wanted to explain. In order to attach a document, as Heidi was mentioning, these are optional, but you can hit this plus sign here, click add files. You can find the file on your computer and then upload it. And you can add multiple files here. So it says upload is complete, so I can click the X and you'll see it appear here once it gets there. Let's save and continue. So now you can see that I have this budget form, and it's blank because I didn't put anything in it, but as I'm going back to it, now I hit either the edit. If you see, if I'm hovering over these little shapes, this one is edit and this one is delete. So I can go back into the budget now and edit it. And it opens the form again, and I can keep working and save it as I go. And let's see, and you can see the documents here that were that I added. And here you can see some options. You can add a new version, so you can just update the document. You can preview it, or you can delete it. And then, as I mentioned, save and close, or save and continue. If you want to keep going, save and close closes it out. And be sure you save. And you can see here now I have this test project title that I typed in earlier is showing up at the top. So later, here, and then once you've saved and closed, then you have the option to withdraw, which means that you decide you don't want to apply it. Or you can submit the application for a preliminary review, which means you're asking for feedback. And before the deadline, of course, give us some time to give you that feedback. If it's too close to the deadline, we might not have time. And so then it would be time to submit for full review. So this is what you push when you're finished with your application and you're ready to submit it. Once you have logged out of, let's just show you what that looks like here on this this little gear sign next to the Flux name is where you can change your password or log out. So I'll show you this. This is the landing page when you first go to the website. You type in your username. If you're setting up your account, you push this button here, create an account now. I won't go through that right now. You can watch the video that we have on our website if you need to. Oops. Okay. So I logged in, and now I have an application that I've already started. So I can go down to this applications part on the left and hit pending requests. And so now this is where the application shows up. If I had multiple applications going, they would all show up here, and I click on this one. So you have to click on it, and then you have to push this edit button up here in order to get started. You can also print it here, the print sign, but push edit, and then you can start working on it again. So just just wanted to show that. I think let's pause there and go back and see if there are any questions.
Hi, Teresa. There's quite a few questions in the chat or in the Q&A. And if I haven't been able to answer some, I'm going to just unmute folks so that you can ask it directly.
Hey, Teresa, this is Don Blakey in the U District, and I think you kind of answered my question earlier, but in going through this, it's pretty clear that it looks like it wants you to propose one project for the grant application, and I just want to double check, like, do you want us to apply a few times for different types of projects, or do you want us to brand like a number of different initiatives under one header as a project?
That's a good question. I think you could do it either way. If you had a lot of small projects that you were going to be organized or, you know, working on together, that, and as a total they totaled up to $100,000 or less, then I think you could do that. I think we were trying to keep this application super simple, and so sometimes that makes it kind of limited.
I get it. For this second round of applications RFP, I think we're going to be working with a bunch of community groups, and there's just a few ideas that are cool, but they're not exactly cohesive as like one statement, but we can maybe wrap it into a larger narrative if that's what you think is best.
I don't know, does anyone else on the team have thoughts about what they think would be best? It's kind of a granting strategy, you know, question as to like what do we think would be a stronger application, having a lot of little things or having or you know, having a lot of little things under one umbrella or having a bunch of separate applications.
Teresa, this is Shara. I think that there's definitely lots of different strategies. However, the main essential question that the review panel is really going to be looking at is, in your narrative, are you able to describe what the impacts of COVID was and really clearly describe how your projects address and help your neighborhood recover? And so I would say that if you're able to describe the impacts and then follow up with the multiple projects, kind of being able to really touch on each of those individual impacts, then that to me really creates a strong, cohesive, and holistic application, and I think would definitely score higher. However, I could see that also with having one larger project that maybe goes deeper rather than wider. And so I think it's just your angle. And it really, really just depends on what your project is. So I think it is challenging to answer that question without knowing what the projects are.
Well, lastly, I'll just lastly say that thank you for that answer. That's helpful. I think we will combine our application because I think we want our strategies to work together to have the largest impact instead of multiple strategies coming in that might not be as coordinated. So we're going to probably go that route, but I definitely hear you loud and clear on the narrative and the data. And I might work with you guys to figure out the data that you're looking at because, you know, I tried to dig into it a little bit and I was having a hard time tracking it. But I'd like to make sure that we're all looking at the same data as we kind of try to tell the story about what's happening in our neighborhoods. So thank you for that. We'll definitely focus on the narrative.
And I'll just add to that, Dawn, this is Heidi, you know, kind of the qualitative piece too that you and your partners can bring to this is really important as well. So there might be, you know, maybe there's a couple of key impacts that, you know, we can support with the analysis that's there, but you're also describing what that means for the small businesses and the community members in your neighborhood, whether it's, you know, decreased foot traffic, and there might be multiple strategies and projects that address that impact, right? So that might be a way to connect and think through this as well.
That's great. Yeah, that's spot on. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? I will go ahead. We're getting close to time.
Oh, yeah. Can I ask a quick one? It's Betty. The cleaning, is that a one-time only cleaning, or could say could it be spread out like every 2 weeks there'll be extra garbage pickup for X amount of time, like 1 year, for example?
I think it can be either. It just has to, you have to be able to explain how the kind of overtime cleaning is helping you recover. And so, I think talking about trying to do the initial cleaning because of store closures or other kinds of things going on, that maybe things have there's been delayed maintenance. And so you have that initial kind of big cleaning. That's an easy case to make. And then if you're thinking about how you need to do it multiple times across the year, then you just need to think about why that is, and how can you, think about people are opening slowly, maybe it's you have to keep it up so that, that the businesses can, you have to have it over time for the businesses to be able to open up safely and confidently and stay open and get customers to come back for repeat. I'm just spitballing, but it just gets down to how you describe the reason behind it and why that links you to neighborhood economic recovery. Does that make sense? So we are at time, but I think I am happy to stay on longer if there are more questions. There were a couple other things we were going to touch on. Just if you aren't familiar with our OED resource line, we still have this going, and it provides in-language assistance to anyone calling up with questions, either just business questions or about this application. You call this number or you email this email and leave a voicemail or a message if you have language needs, and then we will call you back in language. So that's still available. As I mentioned earlier, we will have other resources coming soon, so stay tuned for some of these other things. We have ongoing technical assistance to help businesses with their economic injury disaster loan or their PPP forgiveness work, ongoing outdoor permitting support. We still have our lease amendment toolkit and other kinds of programs. We have some current programs for digital sales, youth website design. So there are a lot of things going on. Definitely stay tuned, and we will have more coming. And lastly, our contact information, again, and it's on our website. So feel free to reach out and ask us. We are happy to set up time and talk with you and answer your questions. Are there any other questions? Okay. I don't see any more. I'm trying to scroll through to see if there are any that we haven't answered. We will look again at all the questions and do our best to answer them. I think we're thinking we might compile all the questions that we've been hearing in our info sessions and try to add them to our frequently asked questions document and send those out afterwards. And I think as we mentioned, we will send out the recording and the PowerPoint again to everybody, and feel free to share that information. Anything else? All right, well, thank you all. Have a good evening. And we do have one more information session. We're covering the same information every time, but of course, new questions come up, so you're welcome to join us again if you want. And we also have options for in-language. So if anyone is interested in getting this information with, in another language, please let us know, and we can set that up. We are setting those up as separate sessions. All right, thank you and have a good night.